December 7, 1941, 7:48 a.m., Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. Japanese aircraft suddenly appear over the U.S. Pacific Fleet. Within 2 hours, 2,403 Americans are dead, 8 battleships destroyed or damaged. The United States is thrust into World War II. But here's what makes this catastrophe an intelligence failure. The U.S. had warnings, multiple warnings. On November 27th, 10 days before the attack, U.S. Navy commanders received a war warning message from Washington. An aggressive move by Japan is expected within the next few days. U.S. codebreakers had cracked Japanese diplomatic codes, and new relations were deteriorating. On December 6, the day before, U.S. intelligence intercepted a 14-part Japanese message that was clearly a declaration of war. President Roosevelt read it and said, "This means war." On the morning of December 7th, 90 minutes before the attack, U.S. Army radar operators on Oahu detected a large formation of aircraft approaching from the north. They reported it. A junior officer told them, "Don't worry about it." He assumed they were American B-17 bombers expected that morning. They weren't. At 7:48 a.m., Japanese bombers struck. The Pacific Fleet was caught completely unprepared. Ships were moored in neat rows. Ammunition was locked in storage. Anti-aircraft guns were unmanned. Sailors were eating breakfast. Why? Because despite all the warnings, diplomatic intercepts, war warning messages, radar detection, no one connected the dots. No one believed Japan would strike U.S. territory directly. No one acted on the intelligence. This is the story of Pearl Harbor, not as a surprise attack, but as an intelligence failure, where every warning was available, but institutional assumptions, poor communication, and cognitive blindness prevented action that could have saved 2,403 lives. By 1941, the world was already at war. In Europe, Nazi Germany had conquered France and was bombing Britain. In Asia, Japan had been occupying China for a decade, but the United States, officially, was neutral. President Franklin D. Roosevelt opposed Hitler and Japanese expansion, but the American public was reluctant to enter another European war. The pain of World War I was still fresh. So Roosevelt tried to support Britain without direct war entry, the Lend-Lease program, economic sanctions, diplomatic pressure. But for Japan, this American policy was a threat. In the 1930s, Japan began expanding with the goal of establishing the Greater East Asia Co-Prosperity Sphere, essentially conquering Asia for resources. 1937, invaded China. 1940, moved into French Indochina, modern Vietnam. 1941, planned further expansion, Dutch East Indies oil, Malaya rubber, Philippines. But there was a problem, the United States. The U.S. imposed economic sanctions in response to Japanese aggression. July 1941, froze Japanese assets. August 1941, imposed oil embargo on Japan. This was a crisis for Japan. The Japanese economy depended on U.S. oil. With the embargo, Japan's oil reserves would run out within 18 months. Japanese leaders faced 2 choices. Option 1, accept U.S. demands, withdraw from China, stop expansion. Option 2, go to war to seize Southeast Asia. But first, neutralize the U.S. Pacific Fleet. In October 1941, Japanese Prime Minister Prince Fumimaro Konoe, pro-peace, resigned. He was replaced by General Hideki Tojo, pro-war. The decision was made: war. But the U.S. Pacific Fleet, moored at Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, was a threat. If Japan expanded south, the U.S. Navy could attack. So the Japanese Navy designed a bold plan. Combined Fleet Commander Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto proposed a surprise attack on Pearl Harbor, destroy the Pacific Fleet, then invade Southeast Asia. The plan had to be secret. Surprise was essential. So did U.S. intelligence know about this? Yes, partially. Throughout the summer and autumn of 1941, U.S. intelligence was closely monitoring Japan. U.S. intelligence capabilities. 1 point, MAGIC, code-breaking program. U.S. codebreakers had cracked the Japanese diplomatic cipher called Purple. This allowed U.S. intelligence to read diplomatic messages between Tokyo and Japanese embassies. The program was codenamed MAGIC. This was an incredible intelligence advantage. The U.S. knew Japan's diplomatic intentions in real time, but there was a limitation. MAGIC only decoded diplomatic messages, not military ones. The Japanese Navy used different codes, JN-25, and these weren't broken, at least not in 1941. This meant the U.S. knew Japanese diplomatic decisions but didn't know military operation details. 2. Intelligence collection, consulates and spies. The FBI was monitoring Japanese spies in America. In Hawaii, the Japanese consulate was sending detailed reports about Pearl Harbor, ship positions, movements, defenses. The FBI knew this, but in 1941, monitoring espionage had legal challenges. Consulate personnel had diplomatic immunity. 3. Radar, new technology. The U.S. Army had installed new radar stations in Hawaii. These could detect approaching aircraft, but radar technology was new. 1941. Operators were inexperienced. Procedures were unclear. November-December 1941. Tensions rising. In November 1941, U.S.-Japanese negotiations collapsed. Japan refused the U.S. demand to withdraw from China. The U.S. refused to lift the oil embargo. War seemed inevitable, but where? November 26, 1941, U.S. Secretary of State Cordell Hull presented Japan with a final proposal, essentially, withdraw from China or sanctions continue. Japan refused. November 27, 1941, U.S. Navy and Army commands sent a war warning message to all Pacific commanders. This is a war warning. An aggressive move by Japan is expected within the next few days. The most probable targets are the Philippines, Thailand, or the Kra Peninsula. The message was clear: war is coming, but the message listed Philippines, Thailand, Malaya as likely targets, not Pearl Harbor. Why? Because U.S. intelligence analysts were convinced Japan would target Southeast Asia. Pearl Harbor, 3,000 miles away in Hawaii, didn't seem like a logical target. This assumption would prove deadly. Warning 1. Magic intercepts, November-December 1941. Throughout November and December, Magic intercepted Japanese diplomatic messages. November 14, 1941. Tokyo to Washington Embassy. Deadline for negotiations is November 25, later extended to November 29. After that, things will happen automatically. War. December 20, 1941. Tokyo to embassies worldwide, destroy code machines and code books. This was standard pre-war procedure. War was near. December 6, 1941, Saturday evening. U.S. intelligence intercepted a long 14-part message from Tokyo to the Washington Embassy. The first 13 parts were decoded that evening. Content: rejection of U.S. policy toward Japan, failure of negotiations. President Roosevelt read the message and told advisor Harry Hopkins, "This means war." The 14th part arrived Sunday morning, December 7th. Final lines: the Japanese government can see no alternative but to advance against the U.S. and British governments. The message instructed Japanese ambassadors to deliver it to Secretary of State Hull at 1 p.m. Washington time, 7:30 a.m. Hawaii time. U.S. intelligence officers saw this and were alarmed. Why such a specific time? Answer: because Japan planned to break diplomatic relations simultaneously with the attack, but no one connected this to Pearl Harbor. Warning 2. WINS messages. December 9. Magic also intercepted a WINS code message, secret signals Japan would use in weather broadcasts. East wind, rain, war with U.S. North wind, cloudy, war with Soviets. West wind, clear, war with Britain. On December 4th, U.S. listening stations began monitoring Japanese radio broadcasts. Some analysts claimed they heard a WINS message, but verification was unclear. But the message was clear. Japan had established a war signal system. Warning 3. Japanese fleet movements. November 1941. In late November, U.S. intelligence noticed something strange. Japanese aircraft carriers were missing. Naval intelligence monitored Japanese Navy radio traffic. Normally, each ship's radio communications revealed its location. But in November, 6 Japanese carriers disappeared from radio traffic. U.S. intelligence analysts didn't know what this meant. Some possibilities. The ships were in Japanese ports. Radio silence. 2. The ships were moving for a secret operation. Reality. The carriers were en route to Pearl Harbor in radio silence, but U.S. intelligence didn't know this, and no one considered Pearl Harbor as a possible target. Warning 4. Radar detection. December 7th morning. December 7th, 1941, 7:02 a.m. Opana Radar Station, north shore of Oahu. 2 Army operators were on duty, Private George Elliott and Private Joseph Lockard. On the radar screen, a large echo appeared. Aircraft approaching from the north, 130 miles away. Elliott was excited. "This is the biggest thing I've ever seen." Lockhart called the Fort Shafter Information Center and reported large formation of aircraft approaching from the north. The duty officer who answered was an inexperienced Lieutenant Kermit Tyler. Tyler thought, B-17 bombers are expected this morning. Must be them. He told the operators, don't worry about it. The radar operators shut down and went to breakfast. 7:48 a.m., Japanese bombers reached Pearl Harbor. The large formations weren't B-17s. They were 103 Japanese warplanes. Why warnings didn't work? Every warning was available. 1. Magic diplomatic intercepts. War is coming. 2. November 27. War warning. Aggressive move expected. 3. Destroy codebooks message. War is near. 4. 14-part message. Roosevelt said, this means war. 5. Missing carriers. Secret operation underway. 6. Radar detection. Aircraft approaching. So why was Pearl Harbor caught unprepared? 1. Wrong assumptions. U.S. commanders assumed Japan would attack Philippines, Malaya, or Thailand, not Pearl Harbor. Why? Because Pearl Harbor was 3,000 miles away. No one believed Japan would launch an attack that far. Also, Hawaii had shallow waters. Torpedoes couldn't work, they thought. The Japanese had developed special shallow water torpedoes. The U.S. didn't know. 2. Poor communication. Radar detection didn't reach the right people in time. Lieutenant Tyler made the decision alone. Didn't consult senior officers. Magic intercepts stayed in Washington. Pearl Harbor commanders didn't see critical diplomatic messages. 3. Peacetime routine. Pearl Harbor operated on peacetime procedures. Ships were parked in neat rows, easy for inspectors but vulnerable to attack. Anti-aircraft ammunition was locked. Air patrol was minimal. Sunday morning, most crew were on leave. 4. Cognitive blindness. Commanders didn't see what they didn't want to see. War warnings existed, but for possible attack, not real attack. No one believed Pearl Harbor would be the target, so warnings were misinterpreted. First wave, 7:48 a.m. At 7:48, Japanese commander Mitsuo Fuchida sent the radio signal, Tora, 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 Tiger, Tiger, Tiger. This meant surprise achieved. 18-3 Japanese aircraft, torpedo bombers, dive bombers, fighters descended on Pearl Harbor. Targets, Battleship Row. 8 U.S. battleships moored side by side. The first torpedoes hit USS Oklahoma and USS West Virginia. The ships began taking on water. Tuco 4 NUS Enkerspike, California, struck by torpedoes. 8 a.m., USS Arizona hit by a bomb. The bomb penetrated the ship's forward ammunition magazine and exploded. The explosion destroyed the front of the ship. 1,177 crew died instantly. USS Arizona sank in 9 minutes. Throughout Pearl Harbor, chaos erupted. Sailors rushed to ships. Anti-aircraft guns were unmanned. Ammunition locked. Personnel tried to break open locked storage. Some anti-aircraft crews began firing within 15 minutes. But it was too late. Second wave, 8:50 a.m. 170 more Japanese aircraft arrived. This wave focused on airfields and remaining ships. Hickam Field, Wheeler Field, Kaneohe, U.S. aircraft were parked in neat rows to protect from sabotage. They didn't think about attack. Japanese planes destroyed them on the ground. 188 U.S. aircraft destroyed, 159 damaged. Attack ends, 9:45 a.m. At 9:45, the second wave withdrew. Total duration, 2 hours. Japanese losses, 29 aircraft, 5 submarines, 64 personnel. U.S. losses, ships, minor USS Arizona, sunk, 1,177 dead. Minor USS Oklahoma, capsized, 429 dead. Minor USS West Virginia, sunk. Minor USS California, sunk. Minor USS Nevada, damaged, beached. Minor USS Pennsylvania, light damage. USS Maryland, light damage. USS Tennessee, light damage. Total 5 battleships sunk or sinking, 3 damaged. Aircraft 188 destroyed, 159 damaged. Personnel 2,403 dead, 1,178 wounded. The Pacific Fleet was neutralized. December 8, 1941. Declaration of War. On December 8, President Roosevelt addressed Congress. Yesterday, December 7, 1941, a date which will live in infamy, the United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan. Congress declared war, unanimous except for one dissenting vote. The United States entered World War II. Investigation, Roberts Commission, January 1942. President Roosevelt established the Roberts Commission to investigate the Pearl Harbor failure. Chairman, Supreme Court Justice Owen Roberts. Findings, January 1942. Blame was placed on Pearl Harbor commanders, Minute, Admiral Husband Kimmel, Pacific Fleet Commander, General Walter Short, Hawaii Army Commander. The commission charged them with dereliction of duty, failing to prepare defenses despite war warnings. Both were relieved of command. They retired. Their careers were ruined. But post-war investigations revealed the blame was broader. Post-war investigations, 1945 to 1946. Congress conducted a comprehensive investigation. Findings: 1. Failure in Washington. Magic intercepts weren't communicated to Pearl Harbor in time. 2. Institutional failure. Navy and Army intelligence didn't coordinate properly. 3. Assumption failure. Everyone assumed the Philippines would be the target, didn't consider Pearl Harbor. 4. Radar failure. Radar detection wasn't followed up with proper procedures. Conclusion: blame was widespread. Kimmel and Short were partially rehabilitated posthumously. Pearl Harbor's long-term impact. Pearl Harbor fundamentally changed the U.S. intelligence community. 1. Need for central intelligence. Before Pearl Harbor, intelligence was fragmented. Naval intelligence, Army intelligence, FBI, State Department, no coordination. After Pearl Harbor, the U.S. recognized the need for central intelligence. CIA Central Intelligence Agency was established to coordinate all intelligence. 2. Pearl Harbor Syndrome. The U.S. vowed never to experience another surprise attack. This created a permanent defensive paranoia, every threat taken seriously, every warning investigated. Good side: in the 1962 Cuban Missile Crisis, U.S. intelligence detected Soviet missiles early. Bad side: in 2003 Iraq, Pearl Harbor Syndrome contributed to WMD overestimation, better to overreact. SIGINT priority. Pearl Harbor demonstrated the value of code-breaking SIGINT. Magic had revealed Japan's diplomatic intentions, but wasn't used effectively. Post-war, the U.S. invested heavily in SIGINT. Result: NSA, National Security Agency, established in 1952. Pearl Harbor left 3 lasting lessons for the modern intelligence community. 1. Having intelligence, 9. Taking action. The Pearl Harbor tragedy wasn't lack of information, it was lack of action. The U.S. had intelligence, war warnings, diplomatic intercepts, radar detection. But no one connected the dots. No one believed Pearl Harbor would be the target. Modern reflection, September 11, 2001, showed a similar pattern. The FBI was monitoring al-Qaeda activity. The CIA knew about suspects taking flight training, but agencies didn't share information. Result: 9/11 attacks succeeded. Like Pearl Harbor, information was available, but coordination failed. Assumptions kill. Pearl Harbor commanders made decisions based on assumptions. Japan will attack the Philippines. Pearl Harbor is too far. Shallow water torpedoes are impossible. Every assumption was wrong. Modern intelligence principle: test assumptions. Use red team analysis. A team should challenge the official assessment. Example: the CIA uses devil's advocate teams on major assessments to question assumptions. 3. Communication failure is deadly. At Pearl Harbor, critical intelligence was fragmented. Washington had magic intercepts. Pearl Harbor commanders didn't see them. Radar operators saw detection. Senior officers weren't informed. Navy and Army worked separately. No coordination. Modern solution: intelligence sharing was standardized. The U.S. established fusion centers, places where multiple agencies combine intelligence. Example: National Counterterrorism Center, NCTC, combines intelligence from CIA, FBI, NSA, DIA. 1941, the U.S. Pacific Fleet was eating breakfast. 2 hours later, 2,403 Americans were dead. Pearl Harbor is remembered in history as a surprise attack, but the truth is, it shouldn't have been a surprise. Every warning was available. Minus, diplomatic intercepts, war warning messages, missing Japanese carriers, radar detection. But institutional assumptions, poor communication, and cognitive blindness prevented action. Result: the United States was thrust into World War II, unprepared, shaken, with 2,403 lives lost. Pearl Harbor changed the U.S. intelligence community forever. The CIA was established. The NSA was established. Intelligence became centralized. Pearl Harbor Syndrome was born, the fear of never experiencing another surprise attack. Today, every intelligence service asks the question, is this our Pearl Harbor? Are we seeing the warnings, or are we missing them? Because history has taught us, Having intelligence isn't enough. You must act on it. This story shows that a surprise attack wasn't actually supposed to be a surprise. If seeing how a series of warnings were ignored leading to 2,403 deaths amazes you, subscribe. Because wars aren't just lost on battlefields, sometimes they're lost in intelligence rooms. Tell us in the comments, have modern intelligence services learned the Pearl Harbor lesson, or are assumptions still a threat?